And now he's the longest serving governor of California and a lifelong environmental advocate. You know all about it. Please join me in welcoming Governor Jerry Brown, who joins Vice President Al Gore via satellite in California.
Thank you, Sam. Governor Brown, are you there?
I'm right here on target here. Big topic, really important. I'm glad you're doing it, Al.
Well, thank you so much, Jerry. We've had lots of private conversations, and I was trying to figure out how to make this conversation sort of like the ones we have when we're just talking, the two of us, and maybe it's impossible, but I was going to ask you, you know, the genesis of your deep convictions about climate. Maybe that's a dumb question, but how did you come to the place where you are now, where you have been really so forward-leaning and bold and doing what people in the past might have thought couldn't be done by a governor? You've really been providing national leadership on this stuff. And what I'm trying to get at is, how did you get to the place where you are now and feeling so deeply about this?
Well, I'll tell you, it was in the early 70s. I was Secretary of State of California. It had been shortly after the Stockholm Environmental Conference.
Yeah.
And there's a Foreign Affairs article written on the environmental perspective after that Stockholm Conference. And in that article, the author talked about the thin soil below and the thin layer of atmosphere above.
Yeah.
And as I thought about that, I realized the limited and in some respects fragile character of the conditions that we human beings take for granted. And that began my real focus on the environment. And one other aspect that you might find interesting, because I spent time, many years in a seminary, a Jesuit seminary, and the focus there was on theology, philosophy, or what they sometimes say is ontology, the nature of being.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of things in politics are very relative and somewhat arbitrary. But when we deal with the environment and the fundamental conditions of nature, that's about as close to theology as I think you can get. So this was an area that I thought was well worth commitment and everything I could do to understand and to take action based on these fundamental principles and challenges which nature, the environment, or ecology throw up for us.
Yeah, that's great. You know, we're going to have limited time, so I'm going to tell you in advance, there are kind of two areas I would like to explore. One is kind of practical, and it involves what are the limits of what other governors can do in forming the kind of compacts you've come up with between states, and even relationships and compacts with foreign countries. A lot of people think, wow, how does he do that? I want to explore that, and then the second thing I want to explore is about how we break through the denial, for lack of a better word, but I'll circle back to that. First of all, you have done amazing things in reaching agreements with other states and with Mexico and Canadian provinces. How do you do that? A lot of people think, can governors really do that? You have.
Well, obviously governors are free to do what they wish within the confines of state law or the provincial law. And I think what I've done is I've called these people up. I've had allies in Germany and other places, and the thing has grown to, I think, over 150 countries, states, regions, and provinces. And what's driving it is the reality, the facts of climate change and the challenge and the imperative to act. So people are responding. So when I call, or people who work with me call these other states and their personnel, people respond. Now, that's number one, and it's driven really by the cause. The science is clear and the peril is dire. Based on those two facts, people are ready to act.
Yeah.
Now, second step, of course, is let's make these commitments, which we have from all these different countries and states. We got to make them real.
Yeah.
So enforcement, implementation is step two, and I am working on that, and I have quite a group of people behind me, and together we're going to form a real working, achieving group throughout the world to achieve at the sub-national level the kinds of things that many of our nation states are not willing to do yet.
Yeah, and you've got a great team. Nancy McFadden, congratulations on appointing Javier Becerra. You've played a tremendously important role in the Paris Agreement, in a lot of the international fora. And of course, now we're entering this period where it's kind of a wait and see period. We don't know how the new administration is going to unfold. But a lot of people are saying that regardless of what happens at the federal level, there is so much momentum now by states and even local governments, and they point to you in California as the premier example. Is it realistic to suppose that the kind of forward-leaning approach that you've taken can actually carry the ball forward in a very meaningful way if there's a period that's different at the federal level?
Yes, and I'll tell you why I think that is. Number one, we states, and California in particular, are not little minor provinces. California has a gross domestic product of over $2.2 trillion. There's only a handful of countries that can even equal that. And even if someone is not at $2 trillion in economic output, they are an integral part of the country where they are a subnational unit. And it's still the same politics. So if through the political forces at the local and state level we can achieve agreement, that will, of necessity, percolate up to the national level. And in addition to that, we've never had, I guess since George Bush, now almost 8 years ago, a person who would test the proposition, climate change isn't real, or if it is, it's not a problem, and we can wait. No one has really advocated that for 8 years now. If our new president takes that as his proposition, I believe that the reaction is going to be negative and very powerful throughout the world. So I don't think, given the science and given the rising concern, that is a sustainable political trajectory, even for the President of the United States.
Yeah, and the other group of big players, of course, is business and industry. We'll leave civil society aside for just a moment, although they're incredibly important. But you have found a way to enlist the business leaders, especially in California, on the side of moving forward on this. And I know that, you know, profits are going up as emissions go down and all of that. California's experience has been unbelievable with, you know, real effective measures to reduce emissions and economic growth that's been incredible at the same time. But is there any advice you would have for other governors or even mayors in approaching the business leaders that respond to them in their jurisdictions?
Yeah, I think not all businesses. In fact, I would say a strong number of business leaders don't take climate change seriously. They're concerned about their business, their bottom line, their employees, their customers. But there are an increasing number that are concerned, and they can be mobilized and strong allies. And we have shown that. In fact, two oil companies, principally from Texas, tried to, by popular ballot referendum, or what we call the initiative in California, tried to stop our climate change laws, and they were soundly defeated with the help of business, even a Republican such as George Shultz. So when you think about it, whether it's Bloomberg or the president of Unilever, other places, there's a lot of business people who are rising to the occasion. I would say, however, there is one cautionary note in copying California. We have had economic growth. We've been in recovery almost 8 years now.
Yeah.
So when things slow down, as they inevitably do, things will get more difficult. But the point that I think is demonstrable and irrefutable is that if you put in a regulation or some incentive for achieving a climate change goal, that does not lower your GDP growth, whatever it may be. It may inconvenience for a time, or maybe for a long time, a certain subsector.
Yeah.
But for the purpose of the whole economy, the essence of economics is that if you're blocked one place, you flow to another. And the creation of so many solar and efficiency and wind jobs just proves that if money can't go to coal, or maybe it can't go to oil so easily, it can move over to solar and wind and storage and efficiency and all the other things that are part of the clean economy.
Yeah, they're talking in my ear. You know the gig here where they're saying we're running out of time. Very briefly, have you had any insights that have become clear to you lately about new ways to break through the formidable denial that some people put up on climate?
Well, okay, that's a very good question. How do you confront denial? And I have confronted some denialists, and it's a hard, I'd have to say, the people who are in denial, who are college educated, prominent in their communities,
some smart
they're
people.
going to be very hard to turn around. But there are many more people, by tens of millions, that, as reflected in the surveys, are open to this idea, and they know climate is changing. We read about these new tropical bugs, the Zika and the West Nile virus. People are dying and are getting paralyzed by West Nile virus.
And we never heard of these things when we were kids.
Temperature rises.
Yeah.
Right, but they're here. So between the forest fires, the odd weather that we get, and these bugs, I would say, and then the sea level, the rises and the storms you see on the East Coast, people are getting it, and getting it in a steadily escalating way so that the older minds will be kind of swept out to sea in this tidal movement of dealing with climate change in an effective way.
Jerry, I wish we had a lot more time. I want you to know how grateful I am for your willingness to be a part of this event. I appreciate our friendship. I look forward to continuing the conversation on a personal basis. And you don't need any praise or flattery, but I'm just going to say it as a matter of fact because I've said it to a lot of others. You're the best governor of any state I have ever served with or had to do with. You don't need to hear that. You're not in it for that. But I just wanted to say that. And thank you very much for being a part of this event.
Well, I will say I am the oldest governor in the United States, and maybe with age comes a little bit of wisdom.
Yeah, a lot, my friend. Thank you very much.